Hey there, everybody. My name's Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist, and welcome to my channel. Those of you here for the first time, welcome. My name is Kat Bowser. I'm a licensed therapist, but I'm also a writer working on my first novel. So, on my channel, I like to talk about what I consider to be the heart of writing, which is the characters, and the heart of the characters is in their psychology. So, that's kind of the angle I try to take with every video that I do, is talking about the psychology behind it. Because in my mind, that makes for a much more well-rounded character, and through characters, then you have a more well-rounded world. So for today, we are continuing with my series on types of magic that I started, I believe it was just before Christmas. So I don't have a collaborator this week, but next week I will have one. So for this week, I wanted to focus on one that doesn't get a ton of attention in that normally it's not referred to as magic, but I tend to consider it a type of one. So today we're talking about chaotic magic. All right, so chaotic magic. What is it? I mean, judging by the name, it implies chaos and no order and unbalance. And in a way that's true, and in a way it's not true. So chaotic magic typically refers to any type of ability or power that does not necessarily come from gods, but it doesn't come from mortals either. It's something that is kind of implied to exist in the universe itself. So I'll give you guys an example. Fate, destiny, prophecies, things that fall kind of into that pattern are considered chaotic magic. And like I said, the name is kind of, I think, a little misleading because I think these types, they're both chaotic, but they're both also extremely balanced. So there's not really, I think, a good name for them, but I think chaotic is the best I can come up with, so that's what I'm going to go with. So the thing about this type of magic is that I think it is one of the few types that cannot be harnessed. It can be, you can kind of see it, like, for example, prophets and oracles and things like that. They can give you prophecies and say, you know, here is your fate, here is your destiny, here's what's going to happen to you. But they don't control it. They're just kind of reporting what they can see, what they can feel. And the thing I like about this kind of magic is that there's this sense of it's beyond what the characters have control over. And I think a lot of times it's kind of fun to introduce an element that your characters can't control, they can't abide by. Now, there is the bad thing about this kind of magic is that if you introduce it into your story, you kind of introduce the idea of, is there free will in your story? And one thing I like to do is I consider myself, when I do fiction writing, I consider fate and destiny to be two separate things. A lot of times they are kind of considered to be intertwined or interchangeable. I don't view them that way. I tend to view fate as something that is essentially assigned to a character. So, you know, you're born, here is your fate, here is what's going to happen to you. Whereas I see destiny as something that your character creates. So, one, your character is essentially told, here's what's going to happen to you. One, your character is told, okay, I'm going to lead you on this path, but what you do with said path is up to you. So I prefer destiny for a lot of things, but sometimes I'll put both in my story simply so I can have destiny trump fate because I like doing that. But this can also be, if you look at, like, for example, the ancient Greeks, they had a lot of prophecies and things like that. I think probably one of the most famous is the prophecy that Oedipus' parents were given when he was born. Because in a lot of Greek myths, you would take your child to see the oracle not long after they were born and kind of get an idea of, okay, here's what my child's life's going to be like. So when Oedipus' parents took their child, they were told that he would grow up and kill his father and marry his mother. So, in an attempt to avoid this fate, they abandoned him in the countryside. But by doing that, he was found by a couple from, I believe it was a shepherd couple, I think. In any event, a couple picked him up and raised him and did not tell him that he was adopted, that he had been found abandoned. So he grows up, hits his teenage years, goes and sees the oracle himself to find out about his destiny, and is told the same thing. You're going to kill your father and marry your mother. So he leaves his adoptive family in an attempt to prevent that fate, not realizing that they are his adoptive parents and not his blood parents. On his journey, he comes across a carriage on the road, gets into a fight and battle with them, kills the carriage owner, who happened to be his blood father. Now, the myth obviously is much more complicated. There's lots more things that happen, but basically, at the end of it all, he ends up going back to the city that he was born to, where his parents had been king and queen, and he, through a series of trials, ends up with the hand of the widowed queen, his mother. So essentially, by trying to avoid his fate, he created his fate. And so that's a type of chaotic magic, in that by trying to avoid it, he actually created it, so it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, which I know I've mentioned before. And the thing that, like I said, I consider fate and destiny to be different. Destiny would be more, I think destiny is more vague, in that you're kind of given, okay, you're going to be an inspiration to the people, for example, would be like a destiny prophecy. Doesn't tell you what kind of inspiration, doesn't tell you if it's good inspiration or a bad inspiration, doesn't tell you who the people are. So destiny is more vague, and it leaves more opportunity for the person to kind of determine it themselves. So those are two that I think are mentioned the most in stories, and that's what we have prophecies and dreams and premonitions and stuff for. But like I said, the premonitions and the dreams and all that stuff, they're not controlling the magic. They're just kind of giving you a viewpoint. I kind of look at it as, I almost view it almost like a chaotic magic would be like this supernova in space. And people that tell you prophecies and whatnot, they're observers from like a space station or a spaceship, so they can see a little portion of it and they report what they see or their interpretation of what they see. Another kind of factor to chaotic magic is that it's never really identified what the source of it is. And I kind of like that little mystery. For example, again, going to Greek and Roman myths again, because I thought this was fascinating when I read it, is the myth of the birth of, I'm going to say his name wrong, Dionysius, Bacchus in Roman, the god of wine. He was born of Zeus and a mortal woman. But basically his mother died because Hera had put into her head that she should request to see Zeus in all his glory. And so Zeus, in an attempt to appease her, had told her, I do love you. Name any request you have, and I swear by the river Styx that I will fulfill it. And so she said that she would like to see him in his full glory. And despite how he begged and pleaded with her to change her wish, she would not. And so he was, even though he was king of the gods, he was bound by that word because he swore by the river Styx. So I like chaotic magic in that it's probably one of the few things in stories that are more powerful than the gods. And I think that's interesting, because I think a lot of times in stories, gods are given, if we use the gods in the story, they're given this, this omnipotent power because they're gods. So I like it when stories introduce the idea that they're not all powerful. There are certain things they can't do. There are certain things they cannot do. Like, for example, in my stories, one of the key goddesses is named Natur. She is the goddess of life, spring, hope, etc. And she is considered the key goddess for a lot of the cultures. Not all of them, but for a lot of them. But she is still bound by certain rules. There's certain things that she cannot do, or certain things she can only do so many times. Like, for example, she's not supposed to resurrect people unless it's a dire circumstance. Like, it's kind of like she's told that, you know, you can resurrect 4 people in 4,000 years, and she has to pick and choose who she's going to resurrect. But Natur is called the goddess of loopholes for a reason, in that she essentially, according to their myth, she has now, when someone dies and she wants to intervene, she thinks she should intervene, but maybe she doesn't have the ability to just straight up resurrect them. She instead will appear to them and say, hey, you've died. I think it sucks. It's not fair. So I'm going to give you a quest that relates to something you have to deal with in your life that you haven't dealt with. If you survive the quest, then you earn your life back. Loophole. So she's bound by chaotic magic, but she's found the little pathways through it. So that's why I like writing her, honestly, because she's a fun character to write. But like I said, she still has things that she can't do, and so she has to kind of rethink how she does them, rethink how she approaches it, because she's still bound by like these universal rules. And I really think that's the best description of chaotic magic, is that it's a series of universal rules that are almost written into the fabric of what makes up the universe, whether you make that works or some kind of spiritual matter, whatever it is in your universe that makes up the universe. These are rules that are written into the creation itself. So that's why I find it interesting, in that it introduces some fun concepts to the story, but because it's so raw and so powerful, I like that mortals can't access it, and I like that even gods can't access it. It's kind of nice to have something that kind of lingers over the heads of the gods, but doesn't completely dictate someone's life. And one thing I do like to see is when the idea that prophecies are all interpretation is brought up. Because I think that's very true. Because, like I said, I kind of view it as people that give prophecies are kind of looking through a very narrow window, and they're reporting what they see, but that's still being filtered through their mindset. If you guys actually look up the myth of Cassandra from, again, I think it's Greek. I'm sure there's other versions and other mythologies that kind of have the same thing, but this is the one I'm aware of. So Cassandra was essentially cursed. I don't remember by which god. I think it was Gaia, but I don't remember, to tell you the truth. Anyway, she was cursed that she would have 100% flawless prophecies, and no one would ever believe her. So she sees all these disasters and all these horrible things that can happen, but no matter who she tells, nobody ever believes her. And that sucks. That's not fair. But I think that's an interesting angle to introduce too, is if you were talking about interpretation, people not believing the prophecies is honestly a fun thing to do, because, I mean, if you think about it, we have news, and we have commenters and opinionators and all that stuff now, so we kind of have to make the choice of who we're going to believe. And I think the same thing should be done with prophecies. Is just because someone supposedly has the sight, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't mean that your character is going to believe them, and it doesn't mean they're always going to be right. So those are fun. Let's throw some more of those in there. I'd like to see more of those, honestly. So that is basically a sum up of chaotic magic. Like I said, it's one that is one of the few where I think characters can't really harness it. They can just kind of look into it and report what they see. And I think that's what makes it kind of different from other types of magic. But I also think that's why sometimes people don't consider it magic, because people can't harness it. But I don't think that is a determiner of magic. Something can be magical even if you can't personally access it, in my thought. So, thank you guys for stopping in and checking out this video. If you guys like this content, make sure you give me a comment below. I will respond to them as soon as I can. If you want to see and not miss a video when I upload, make sure you subscribe. I upload every Thursday, every Sunday, and I will throw an additional video in there for you guys every so often. And I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.